Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs. Today, in this conversation, we're going to be talking about the midlife moment where you realize you've been living responsibly, but not quite fully, how you've parked a dream on the back burner, and how one word, yet, can change what you think is possible. I'm going to hand the floor over to my guest, Tim Pecker. And Tim, give yourself a bit of an introduction, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Yeah. So my name's Tim Packer. I'm a full-time professional artist. I've had a very successful career now for 26 years. But when I was younger, I made the safe decision to not pursue art because I made the decision and honestly believed that I wasn't talented enough to become a successful artist. So I gave up on the dream. I joined the Toronto Police Force and I served as a police officer for 18 years, ending up as a detective in our commercial crime unit. And then when I turned 40, I decided to give that dream one more shot. So I actually quit my job, walked away from my pension, and started that whole dream of becoming an artist. It's the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, but it's worked out very good. And now here we are, 26 years later, I've made several $1,000,000 from my art. I have a successful online art academy. I self-publish my work. And I just actually today, my book just went live on Amazon. So we launched the book last night at midnight, and I've discovered over time how important the word yet is. When we tell ourselves self-limiting things, when I said to myself, I wasn't talented enough to become an artist, I would have been 100% right if I just added the word yet. I wasn't talented enough yet, but that doesn't mean I couldn't become talented enough. And that led to the whole kind of, discovery of the growth mindset that your talent is not something that you have or don't have or are born with. Your talent is just the sum total of your skills, knowledge, experience, and creativity. And all of those things can be improved.
One thing that I think about with your story is a lot of people who are in public service will look at it and say, well, what about my pension? And they won't leave because there's a bit of a golden handcuffs, if you will, to that pension. What was that moment where you picked up the paintbrush and said, you know what, I am going to be an artist, where you actually said, okay, I am going to let go of those handcuffs? Pardon the pun, I guess.
So it didn't happen right away. I got back serious about my art, I guess, for about 4 or 5 years before I left the police force. And that actually came about as when things happen, tragedy happens, whatever, often it makes us re-examine our own life. So I had a good friend of mine was a police officer, and he was killed in the line of duty, and he was exactly the same age as me. And I had always kind of carried around the idea that, someday I'll get back to my art. Maybe when I retire, I can get back to it. And, because I'll do my 30 years, then I'll have another 30 years, and then I can kind of see what I can do with the art. And when my friend was killed, it just really brought it home that, there's no guarantee for that I would finish out my career and then have 20 or 30 years to pursue art. And I just realized that, I'm an artist, and I realized that if that was me, if that had happened to me, nobody that was attending the funeral would even know that I was an artist, because I was an artist, but I was not painting. And I hadn't really painted for a number of years. And so that did two things for me. That made me decide that, okay, I'm going to get back to art. And that was about the same time that I discovered the whole idea of the growth mindset, that your talent is not limited, it's not fixed, and that you can improve it. And I read an article from Harley Brown, who's another fellow Canadian, a very successful artist. And he said, if you wanted to become a successful artist, it was just all about hard work. And he said, he 100% guaranteed that you could be successful. But a little voice in the back of my head said, but what if he's right? What if I really just did give up too soon, and I could have actually been living my dream as an artist if I had just kept with it? So I thought, well, I'm going to live my life for the next year as though I believe it. And so that meant that I started scheduling my painting time. So I was painting 3 times a week, regardless of whatever else was going on. And I started looking at the things that I knew I really wasn't that strong on, things like composition, and just really worked to make those things that I had been avoiding, to make them my strengths. And by the end of the year, I had a painting accepted in a jury show. It won an award. I'd had my first studio open house where I'd sold a number of paintings. And I realized, I guess this stuff's true. So even at that point, though, I wasn't thinking about leaving the police force. I thought, well, I'm going to be as serious as I can about this, so that when I retire, I thought, well, I could have potentially an already going kind of side business. But within 3 years, like, I'd been elected to the Canadian Society of Painters and Watercolor. I'd been elected as a senior signature member of the Canadian Institute of Portrait Artists. I'd had work in a lot of international exhibitions. I already was busier than I wanted to be painting portraits. And it was, and that was in 1999. I just had, I think, my fourth or fifth studio open house. I had a big backlog of portraits to do. And my wife said to me, you know what? I think we should talk not about if you leave the police force, but when. And this was in the fall of 1999. The timing was perfect. So I basically, when I went home for Christmas vacation from the police force, I never came back. Started the new millennium as a full-time artist.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, one thing I was thinking about too, like when you said, you knew you wanted to be an artist at 12, but we often like always get kind of pushed into a different direction, maybe from our parents or whatever. But what would you say to a midlife woman who's maybe listening to this podcast saying, I do have a dream. Maybe it was to be an artist, or maybe it was to be something else. Maybe it's to use some other skill that she has, but she's just too scared to take the plunge. Like you said, it's a lot of hard work. She could be thinking, I don't know, maybe I'm too old to be doing something like that. It's too risky. What would you suggest to her to how to look at that?
Yeah, well, I would say the number one thing is just to start, right? Like, again, when I started getting back into painting, I had no thought that it would ever turn into this amazing career that I've had now. But I just realized that that was something that was innately part of who I was and who I was meant to be. And I just thought, well, I better start doing it, right? Because here's another thing. Like, I almost died in 2019 twice. That was the year of the thyroid from hell. And there were two separate times when I was lying on the gurney in the hospital with my wife, and we weren't sure if I was going to be here 10 minutes from then. No, I ended up, everything is okay now. I'm fully recovered. My thyroid's gone. I'm good. But here's the thing I got out of that more than anything else is while I was lying there thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be here anymore. The biggest feeling that went through me was gratitude. I wasn't afraid. I was just thinking, if this is it, like, I don't want to go. I still have a lot more I want to do. I knew it would be really hard on my wife and my boys, but I thought if this is all that I got out of life, I am just so thankful because I got to live my dreams. And so I would say for people that are like afraid of trying, because we're all afraid of failing, right? We're all afraid of trying something and then having it fail, and the amygdala, the lizard brain kind of perks up, and all of a sudden we get that fear and it can become kind of paralyzing. But I would say the thing that you want to be afraid of more than anything else is to face that moment where you are thinking this might be it, and to realize that not only did you not take a swing, you never even stepped up to the plate. So just try. And if that thing is not it, then maybe there's something else. But yeah, we all are living so much longer now. And, that whole thing that they say, there are no second acts. It's like, well, that's not true anymore. Like, I had a 18-year career as a police officer, and now it's been 26 years as a full-time artist. And now I'm an author as well. So yeah, it's never too late. And the best part about it too, is with the internet and with YouTube, with online courses, with podcasts, like information about how to become successful or how to become competent about whatever it is you want to do. It's never been closer. It's literally at your fingertips. You don't even have to leave your house, and often it's free. So I would say to people, just start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right there where, even 5 years ago, it was difficult to start something online. You usually would have to buy somebody's course or like how to start an online business, things like that. But now even with AI, like just plunking it in, it just becomes your coach. I think about a lot of when I've dealt with midlife women who were trying to come up with an idea to start a business. And the first question we go through is the skills. And so a lot of them will say, I don't have any skills. And I think, oh, well, hold on a second, you do. But you use the powerful reframe of yet. So talk a little bit more about that. And if a woman is starting, at midlife 50, what is the first skill you would want her to build so that she could start to stack a few fast wins? Because I think that's out of the gate. We need to have these fast wins that make us feel like we're gaining a little bit of momentum. Maybe you could use a bit of your past experience in that area.
The one thing about being an entrepreneur is it's a long game. It's the idea of the get rich quick kind of one hack to do something and become successful. That's very attractive. But I mean, in my experience, it can happen quickly. But I think the first thing that that people need to do, there's something I call dominoes. It's like, what's the one skill or concept, or it might even be mindset. Actually, that is the one thing I would talk about first. Is that is the one thing I would say is mindset. And mindset is the idea that, your skills, your talent, all of it is not limited, and that your ultimate potential is only limited about by how badly you want the thing to happen. And so I would say for most people, that's the number one thing. And mindset is a choice. You can either choose to believe I'm not talented enough or I'm not skilled enough, or you can choose to believe I can become skilled enough to do whatever it is I want to do. But there are certain things that really go into that. And one of those things is the self-talk that we say to ourselves. But the other thing is the people that you surround yourself with. So studies have shown that every person's mindset is the average of the 5 people they spend the most time with. So if you are spending time with people with negative defeatist attitudes, people are saying, a lot of artists say, oh, you can't make a living as an artist, right? Or the world doesn't appreciate art, or Instagram's algorithm is out to get me. If you're hanging around with people who are blaming external factors on their lack of moving forward, then that's going to become your mindset. And by the same token, if you spend time with people who have a growth mindset, and even people who not only believe in the growth mindset, but have put it into practice and actually gone and done the things, then that will rub off on you and that will become your mindset. And the great thing is that studies have shown that even things like this, listening to podcasts or watching YouTube videos, has the same impact as sitting in a room and talking with someone. So there's so many people right now on the internet, on YouTube, of the growth mindset that are pushing the growth mindset, and also people who have done that. So that's what I would say to people is the very first thing you have to do is get your mindset to the point where you actually believe you can do it. And the best way to do that is search out people who are proponents of the growth mindset and who have actually gone and demonstrated it, and just get into the practice of watching them on YouTube, listening to their podcasts, whatever. And then the thing is, I look at dominoes. It's like, what is the one biggest skill or competency or concept that would have the biggest impact going forward if you were to master that, right? So it might be something like, video editing, right? Or being able to go online for a lot of people. I know a lot of people at a certain stage in life, even just getting online and watching YouTube or going to listening to podcasts. It's like, wow, I didn't grow up with this stuff, but it's like, what is the one thing that's going to have the most impact going forward? And then figure out, okay, what do I need to do? Or more importantly, who can I go to where I can learn that? And I love Alex Hormozi. He has as a thing he talks about, like, how do you decide who you're going to listen to? Because there's a lot of really great information out there for free, but then there's also a lot of snake oil salesmen out there they just want your money with the get rich quick type thing. And I love what he said. He said, well, when you're choosing who to follow, he said, you want to find people who've done 2 things. You want to find someone who's actually been successful at the thing that you're doing, right? So no 20-year-old life coaches. But you also want to find people who have actually helped other people achieve success in that same thing too. And if you can find people, whatever it is you want to do, and they're out there and they're on the internet, but find those people who have been successful at the thing you're interested in trying, and they've also been successful at helping other people succeed in it, and then learn from them, right? You don't need to go and make all the same mistakes that I made when I left the police force. It took me 5 years when I left the police force until I was earning $30,000 from my art because I didn't know what I was doing. In 2017, I mentored a young artist who was just a hobby painter. She just graduated from university as a landscape architect, and I was good friends with her dad, and she decided she wanted to pursue art. And with me mentoring her, she was able to hit that $30,000 in her first year of painting full time. And it's not because like she was amazingly gifted. It's just because, if you put a little bit of effort in the right direction, it can have a huge impact. If you put a lot of effort in the wrong direction, you can have little or no impact. And that's what I was doing. And then with Brooke, she was able to put a huge amount of effort in the right thing at the right time in the right order. And so that just really fast forwarded that whole kind of improvement of her skills and then into her business. And now she's got 500,000 followers on social media. She's living in Vienna, and she's got a legion of collectors around the world that buy her work pretty much as soon as she finishes.
Yeah, that's great. And one thing that stood out for me there was the fact that, obviously mindset, yes. I mean, and we can be our own worst saboteurs all the time. And in some cases, we don't even know we're self-sabotaging.
Mhm.
Maybe you're sitting down to do a project and, oh, I'm tired, I'll do it tomorrow. Self-sabotage. Like it's kind of like you've got to note those moments and kind of push through. One thing that you were saying though is about the mentorship. And so when you started and it took you said 5 years to
Yeah.
get your first 30,000, why do you suppose that is? Did you have mentorship at that point, or was it just that you weren't going all in yet? You were still doing your work. You were working full time. And so how do you find the energy, I think, to keep persevering with let's quote unquote, a side hustle at this point? And then how do you know when to really start to say, okay, I've got to hook my line to somebody. If I want to get to the peak of this mountain, I'm never going to be able to get there on my own. So I guess you could, but I'm assuming it'll take you a lot longer and you might die on the hill while you're doing it. So when did you know to pick up the mentorship part of it?
Well, the mentorship part came pretty quickly for me because when I was elected to the Canadian Society of Painters and Watercolor, well, they're still on the police force, and they had a big symposium they were holding out in Bowen Island. And I went to that symposium and I ended up meeting a number of artists who were already professional artists and came home with about 4 or 5 mentors that I could call on. I picked all of their brains all of the time. And I started noticing that there were certain common things that everybody had kind of gone through and started putting those together. And then I started putting those into practice for myself. And then that's when things really took off for me. But it wasn't until really that 5th year that I discovered the voice. And that's the other thing I didn't know coming in is that, to be successful as an artist, it's very much like being very successful as a musician or a singer. You have to not only produce great work, but you need to do it with a unique voice that's recognizable, right? That's why I love watching like American Idol and The Voice. And there's all kinds of singers out there that are technically brilliant, but they just sound like another technically brilliant singer, and that they spend their life doing corporate gigs. And then you see people like Willie Nelson or Bruce Springsteen or Rod Stewart that, aren't technically as good in terms of hitting the notes of these people, but they've got a unique voice that people love. And that really took me about 4 years in to kind of discover that, first of all, that's the key, that you need to develop a unique voice. And then it was a couple year period of actually going to search for that voice. Because when I left the police force, I thought I was going to be a portrait painter and I was very good at that. But then very quickly I realized didn't want to paint other people's people the way they wanted me to paint them. And that's what I was ending up doing. And I kind of realized, oh my God, I quit my job. I've cashed in my pension. And now I'm stuck doing something I really don't want to do. And then there was that couple year period of searching for what it was that I had to say that was kind of different than anyone else's that would allow me to make a living from it. And that took me 5 years to do.
So on our pre-call, we talked a lot about sort of you noticed a big gap, right? At these art groups, there's like mostly women, but yet the top earners were mostly men for a very long time.
Yep.
What do you think was driving that? Why do you think men were the top earners, even though, a large portion of it was women?
And I have to say too, that's not the case anymore. If you look at all of my success stories, there's the odd guy sprinkled in there, but most of them are women, whether they're young women or women in their 50s or 60s. But when I first started, actually, I know this because I had a friend of mine actually say this to me. She said, "You're so lucky you're a guy." And I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Well, because you get to be selfish. You get to be selfish about your career. You're not expected to be putting dinner on the table. You're not expected to be the side kind of hustle in your relationship." And my wife was a banker, and she made it very clear that I had to figure out a way to make a good living as an artist, or I'd be working in corporate security. So I think a lot of my mentors were women who were of a generation older than me. And I remember saying to them, like, we were away on vacation for like a month and we had company coming a lot of the time. But even when the company was there, like I'd be in the garage painting from 2 till 6 in the evening. And they would say, "Well, there's no way I could do that. We've got company. I've got to be entertaining." And then the other thing that she said, people just assume that you're more accomplished because wow, if you quit your job as a police officer to paint full time, you must be really good. And she said, well, they assume that our husband is making the living and we're just kind of the side hustle. But I do think the number one thing was that, like, to be successful as an entrepreneur, it takes a lot of dedication and a certain amount of selfishness to your business. And I think, prior to our generation, women weren't really given permission to be selfish. And now, yeah, not only are they given permission, but I see women taking the world by storm, especially in the arts, where that number is actually being flipped.
What do you think healthy selfishness looks like in practice for a woman?
Well, the whole thing, though, really, I think, like, when we talk about selfishness or being givers or whatever, it's kind of, we're putting other people's needs ahead of our own often the time, right? That I think is one of the reasons why it's much harder for women, because often they're expected to put their needs after the others in their family, whether it's their husband, whether it's their kids or whatever. But I think you can be selfish in a good way too, in that, you become the best wife, the best mother, the best grandmother, the best sister, the best friend, if you become who you are really supposed to be. If you become your best self, I think you are there more to give to other people than if you're continually just kind of putting your dreams on the shelf. And not only that, it's if you have other young women in your life, right? Being that example for them to say and to show, not only to say, but to show that, as a woman, there are no limitations about what you can achieve if it's something that's really, really important to you.
So Tim, I want to move to your whole art evolution, right? It's evolved into a school where you're helping and you're teaching others. And now this book, which I don't know if I knew about the book, and I want to talk a little bit about that as well. So what was that evolution for you? And how did you kind of know that you wanted to become a teacher? Because not everybody teaches either, everybody,
Okay. Yeah, there's a great story. And there was a moment when that happened. This was back in, I think it was 2015. And I had a solo show at one of the top galleries in Toronto, right down in Yorkville. And it was like the movie version of an artist achieving success. The gallery was open from 10 in the morning till 5 at night, but it closed, and then it was reopening for the opening of the show while they hung the show. So I was in the front window of the gallery working on a painting, and I could see around 6:30 people starting to line up in front of the gallery. And by the time they opened the doors at 7 o'clock, there was a lineup down the block. And people rushed in. There was a live entertainer performing. There was waiters walking around with trays of wine, and there was red stickers going up on the wall as paintings sold. And this was in November. So I already kind of knew where I was kind of in the year financially. And as I was watching all of these paintings sell, I realized I was going to make over $250,000 that year from the sale of my art. And it just blew me away. And I just remember thinking, this is so far beyond what I was going for. I never even allowed myself to think that this kind of success could happen. But very quickly, I had another feeling that kind of came over me that wasn't all just, basking in the glow. And at first I thought maybe I'm feeling guilty. And I thought, no, that's not it. And then I realized what it was responsibility, that I knew how I had got here. Things didn't happen just by accident. I didn't know at the start what the plan was, but I knew at this point that all of the steps that I had taken to allow this to happen. And I also knew that I wasn't special. Every class I ever took, there were artists that were more naturally talented than me and a lot more talented. And I knew there were so many people out there that shared that same dream, but they were never going to achieve it because they didn't know how to get there. It wasn't that they didn't want it bad enough. It wasn't that they weren't willing to work hard enough. It was just that they didn't know how to get there. And I thought, I'm pretty sure I can help anyone get there. So literally the next day, I went to video photography store here in Toronto. I dropped 25 grand on equipment and I started putting out the YouTube videos. And I was doing this at first just as kind of a passion project, just as kind of a karma investment to kind of give back to art that had been so important and so much giving me a life beyond my wildest dreams. And so I was just doing it kind of for free. Had no intent of monetizing it or anything. And then in 2017, that was when I had the opportunity to mentor that young artist, Bormier, that went on to such huge success. And so I knew, okay, like, if you put this stuff into practice, it can actually work and work really, really quickly. But I was still just doing it as a side passion project. And I was doing it. I felt kind of noble, right? It's like, I'm not going to charge for this. I'm just giving this away for free. And then I actually had a few people tell me, you're being selfish, right? If you really think you can help this many people, how many more could you help if you did this full time and put full effort into it rather than just what you could do in your spare time, and just basically kind of reframed the thing that I used to say is I used to say, I'm going to make my money off my wealthy clients, not off the backs of starving artists. And I had to reframe that to say, well, the more money that I can make, the more successful I can make this art academy, that's because I'm helping more people, and not feel guilty about charging for that. And so that was in 2020 when I kind of got the clean bill of health. And then that's when we launched the Art Academy. And we just crossed $600,000 in course sales this month too, since
That's great.
2020.
So inside that art academy, you actually teach sort of three modes, if I recall: practice, process, and product.
That's important to learn anything. So it doesn't matter whether you're learning video editing or learning how to run a podcast or doing social media. It's So the basic thought is, like, we all know what practice is. So like for an artist, practice would be, doing a sketchbook every day, drawing for 20 minutes in a sketchbook, or going to life drawing classes. But it's where you're just working on improving specific skills, but you're not creating anything that's finished that you're going to sell or anything like that, right? So that's practice. And then there's product mode, which is where we try to create the best thing that we can do, whether it's a video, whether it's a song, whether it's a piece of art, whether it's a newsletter. But when you're in product mode, you're only using the skills, the competencies, the knowledge, the techniques that you're confident and competent in. And if you do that, whatever the level that you currently have set as kind of, this is the bar that I'd like to hit, you'll keep hitting that bar over and over and over. But the problem is you won't grow. You won't get any better. And the only way to get better is to spend time trying things you don't know how to do, stepping outside of your comfort zone. And that's when we're in process mode. And when you're in process mode, you're trying those things that you aren't competent in. It might be the first time, like, I'm going to try painting in oils, or I'm going to try painting with a palette knife, or I'm going to try to paint a person, right? You're doing something you haven't done before. But what often happens is it doesn't turn out very well. And so people are like, okay, well, that didn't work out very well. And so they scurry back to their comfort zone, and then they try something else and it doesn't turn out very well. And they scurry back to their comfort zone. And then just the thought of trying something new, that now brings up that fear of failure, and the old amygdala kind of comes up. And now you're afraid of doing the thing because what if I fail? And that's where we get writer's block, painter's block. It's like, they're not afraid of painting. They're afraid of painting a bad painting. They're afraid of writing a bad book. Where the whole thing you have to understand is that when you're in process mode, when you're trying something that you don't know how to do, stuff is supposed to fail. It's going to fail, and that's okay. That's part of the process. That's part of the learning process. So that if someone tries something new and they paint an absolute dog's breakfast, the worst painting they've ever painted in their life, that was a successful painting because you tried the thing. And to get good at anything, it's not just knowing what to do often, it's often also knowing what not to do. So when you have a painting that's, going along fine, and then it goes into the ditch, you at least know, okay, well, next time, I don't know what I'm going to do at that point, but I'm not going to do that. And over time, that's how we get better. So the whole idea is you want to be continually cycling between product mode, practice mode, and process. And the thing is, every time you come back to product mode, now you have new skills, you have new knowledge. And so your product level just keeps going up and up and up. And if you don't do that, then you just stay where you are. I know many people that when I first left the police force and started painting, and I started doing like the little art festivals, there were people there who were more successful than I was at the beginning that painted just nice little kind of cutesy paintings. And here we are 30 years later, they're still just painting those same kind of paintings and just having like a moderate success at a low level. Whereas I've gone on to have, an amazing career, but it's because of always kind of never being afraid to fail. Except here's the one thing, you always just want to make sure failure is not going to be catastrophic for you. It's not going to take you out of the game. So you need to always think that if I fail at this, am I still going to be okay? If you're going to be an entrepreneur, You need to play the infinite game. And that is, you just want to always wake up able to play tomorrow, but taking those risks, but making sure that failure is not, you're not going to lose your house.
And so now talk a little bit about your program.
Sure. Yeah, there's that. Well, so I just released the book. So that's actually,
Yes, talk about that.
that's 38 chapters of everything I wish I knew when I left, but it's actually a step-by-step plan to starting right with, okay, first of all, we need to deal with the art problem and then going into the business. So the book was just released. So that's all of it just there. But in my course on my Art Academy, I have a number of courses where you can just kind of download or not download, buy the course, and then it streams from the websites. And then I also have my Hungry Artist community. And so that's really for people who are really committed to making a full-time living as an artist. So in that group, they get all of my courses. We also have a private Facebook community for the members. But most importantly, every month, I do a live Zoom call for the members in the community where I'll critique their work, I'll answer questions, and I'll offer coaching advice. And so that's the big thing where I'm there every week to give them that advice so that they can be spending their time focused on the right thing at the right time.
So if somebody wanted to create a little bit of pension money from art, what is that business model and where should they get started?
I would really recommend just buying my book. You can get the ebook for $2.99. And because I'm so committed to changing lives, we're offering as a free bonus to anyone that buys the book, there's a page at the back with a bonus link. They can get my online course, Creating Your Plan for Success. And that's a $199 course that they'll get absolutely free just for buying the book for $299. That lays out how to go about creating a step-by-step plan, because it starts off, first of all, with the art, right? Usually it's drawing and composition. Those are the two most important things. And then once you get there, then it's moving on to different techniques. And then it's searching out influences. So artists whose work you really like and using them as influence to develop various skills and various techniques. And then going on to kind of trying to find your own unique voice where you love the work, the public loves the work, and you love the process. But there's no point trying to create a business when you can't draw, don't know composition, nobody wants your work, right? But the one thing I'll tell you is that you only need 4 things to be successful as an artist. It doesn't matter where they are right now in terms of like what's their natural talent. You need to have a passion for art. You need to have a solid work ethic, and you need to have a willingness to learn. And if you've got those things, then you need a plan. And again, that's where I come in. And that's kind of the thing that I offer is giving people that plan. But I believe 100% that if you want it bad enough, you can absolutely become successful. But I've put together the plan, and I've seen it happen with a number of people that I've mentored now that have gone on to great success much quicker than I did. And in every case, they weren't as far along when they started as I was. Because when I left the police force, I was already fairly accomplished artist. I already had a fairly impressive CV. I already had a business doing portraits. And I've been able to help people who were just painting as a hobby kind of get to that $30,000 earnings in as little as a year. Now, one of my very first students that joined on the Art Academy, Emily Valentine, she sold out at the Toronto Artist Project in her very first show. Then she had a bunch of sellouts, and now she's making a very good living as an artist. She's making over $80,000 a year just from her art. But last year she won first prize in the Kellogg art competition, and that came with a $50,000 check. So she was a university student watching me mentor Brooke and watching this success that she was having and just dreaming about it, but had convinced herself she wasn't talented enough to make a living as an artist. And now she's one of my biggest success stories. And so it's not about where you start. It's about where you finish. But the key is you have to start. You have to take that first step.
And so where should listeners start if they wanted to keep going after this episode?
I would say the easiest place to start is go to my website. So timpackerartacademy.com. They can get 5 free chapters of the book. Then I would really encourage purchase the book. And then if you're interested in my courses, again, that's at timpackerartacademy.com, whether it's just the recorded courses or the Hungry Artist community. But the one thing I would say, if someone's interested in pursuing art, there is one hack I can tell you that will allow them to get better quicker. And that is that you need to paint or draw 3 times a week. You can't kind of just every month to go on a weekend workshop and then come back and not paint for a month or two and then go back on a workshop, because it's like working out, right? If you just went to the gym once a month and worked out for 8 hours, you'd just get really sore, but you wouldn't notice any benefit. And it's that kind of cumulative of kind of every couple days being in there, exercising those creative muscles where you get to learn each time you get a little better, but you're starting again before the rust starts to get on there. And so you have that incremental improvement. So that's the number one thing I would say, that whatever it is that you decide that you want to do, and I'm pretty sure it's the same with any sort of creative thing. If you're doing it at least 3 times a week, you'll build on that progress. If you only do it once in a blue moon, even if you do it for a week, it's like, yeah, you might get really good or improve in that week, but then over the next 6 months, then you lose all of that improvement.
And you talk about that like progress, right? Like just
Yeah. Small
getting better
steps.
and better. Yeah, exactly. And not being that same artist you were 5 years ago or even 3 months ago type of thing. So Tim, thanks for your story. It's such a great story. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody leaving the police force, public service like that, where again, they're attached to that pension. That's how most people who I talk to in public service think. And so good for you for taking the risk, taking for the jump. And thanks for sharing your story. Just for everybody listening, the book name is
You can sell your art.
You Can Sell Your Art. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for sharing your story, and we will chat with you soon.
Okay, thanks. It was a pleasure being here.